So I'm Scott. I've met some of you, not all of you, and I'm sure some people are going to be kind of signing on as we go. There's some more. All right, you guys are a good group. You guys are awesome. Today is we always kind of set up this open house specifically today, which is November 2nd, which, if you know any high school seniors, is the day after hell has come and gone. Uh, November 1st is early action, early deadline. And yesterday, I think we estimated we got out about 1,000 early action applications. So that's only about 200 kids, but averaging about 5 apiece. But just to kind of put things in context, that's a year from now for high school juniors. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is framing today. Tonight, I'm going to be framing out a year, the way it is from today until this time next year. The college process keeps going, as we know. The college process now goes on to the UC deadlines, which are November 30th. And then we go on to all the straggling deadlines. Then we go to wait lists. Then we go to acceptances and which ones you're going to choose. And then we go to appeals if need be. So it keeps going. But December to December is when we kind of think about the college year. The way I want to start this is kind of the way I always do with our town halls, is to put a link in the chat that will be this agenda, and I'm going to put it there now. And if you go to the top of the link, the top of the page, when you get in there, you're going to see on the upper left corner, file, make a copy. And if everyone just can, if you want to, you make a copy for yourself. This way, families can kind of edit and make notes, and this way you're kind of keeping track of things that are going on. If you don't want to do that and you just want to sit back, that's fine too. Because we're going to be, we're going to send this recording to everybody in case you want to, get any information you missed. But sometimes people just like to take notes. So I do encourage, most of our families do this on town halls. They just go and they kind of start taking notes if they need them. Other people just have a glass of wine and chill out. So, the big picture. So let me just start there. This was our 21st year of early actions, and of my 21st year of early actions with Blue Train. I was doing college stuff before then as well. I think there's always this feeling of like, are things getting more competitive? Is it getting harder to get into college? Are the UCs going to make it impossible for my child to get in, or whatever it is? So I know there's always a lot of concern and fears and things. And I always just want to tell families, things go up and down, and they're like pistons, in a car. Some things goes up, some things go down, but things are not increasingly getting more difficult. Things will kind of, tighten up in some areas and relax in others. The only year that I saw that was really hard was COVID, because that was the year when they got rid of tests for the first time, and all of a sudden schools were just inundated with applications and they didn't know how to process them. And there were a lot of drop balls, a lot of kids that should have gotten in places, or, probably should have and didn't. But everything's kind of resurrected itself. The college process is back in its flow. And I want to also say something that as we go through this year, and I don't want to get all super philosophical, because I know you guys don't want to listen to me drink my coffee after a long month and just talk philosophically about the college process, but I'm going to talk philosophically for 1 second. I honestly think the college process is beautiful. Like, I know a lot of people would probably look at that and go, that's crazy. Like, it's just applications and whatever. But no, it's not. It's a lot more than that. And it depends on how you take it. You can look at the college process as something where you're biting your fingernails, like, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? How do I game the admissions committee? How do I kind of sneak into places where I normally shouldn't have gotten into? And yeah, you can do that too. But there's also the part of it that there is so much growth to be had in your children over the course of this next year, whether it is them kind of even understanding what college is all about, whether it's their finding majors that they're interested in, whether it's they're going through the hustle. I'll give you an example. I had a good friend of mine whose son went through the process, and he just got his early applications in yesterday. And he called me up and he's like, oh my God, thank God, we got it in. And this, he was stressed out and kind of worried about, the whole process. And I was trying to tell him that every single step of the way, his son not only was learning more about the colleges out there, he was learning what he was interested in. He was learning about what it means to become a good writer during application essay season. He was learning kind of what he really wanted and how to express himself. He was learning, basically about, I hate to say it, but how to be like an adult in a lot of ways. And that goes for a lot of students. And I think we can either look at this process as something we fear or something we embrace. And that's literally up to everyone out there. You guys can be people that kind of look at this and say, oh my gosh, I want to get ahead of the curve. I want to get everything done ahead of time. And, we always say the college process has its own timeline. Type A's don't always survive the best in this. A lot of time it's doing things at the right time. I see there's kind of a little thought out there. Jennifer, did you like look at your eyes? I just watched everybody's faces. So the thing that happens is that when we are going through the process, we always say students and parents who do things at the right time fare better than students and parents who do things ahead of the right time. So a lot of what I'm going to try to do today is kind of discuss the difference between those two things and really try to give everyone just like a mental picture of what's coming up. But I also want to not feel like I'm talking into a vacuum. So what I want to ask everybody, if you have specific things, and we'll get to questions at the end, and I'll carve out time for that, and you guys can ask anything about any part of the process. I'm happy to answer it. But if there's anything on your mind that specifically you're interested in hearing about, whether it's about testing, whether it's about scholarships, whether it's about college searches, whether it's about activities, community service hours, just throw it in the chat, just so this way I can have like a mental calibration of what people are wanting out there. And if not, I'm just going to do a broad scale, Zamboni of it all and just kind of, clean it all up as we go. So I'll just kind of let you guys kind of tap that into the chat box as we go. But let's kind of start out with the first part of the process. The first part of the process is going to be for a lot of people testing. I mean, there's actually, I lied. I'm going to go back. The first part of the process is grades. Okay. So about your course schedules, about your classes, about your, GPAs. I think a lot of students, before I get into testing, I just want to say that above and beyond all else, and I don't mean to scare any students or scare any students' parents out there, the GPA is the most important. Okay, that's the thing that is we say that takes priority over testing, that takes priority over, application deadlines sometimes. It takes priority almost over everything. So what I tell a lot of children, students that are coming to us and they're starting out their junior year and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm an AP Chem, I'm in APUSH, my English teacher's a monster, and they kind of have all these things that they're saying. And as we're going through it, they realize that first semester junior year was rougher than they thought. And that can often happen. And on the newsletter that was sent out to you, we call that the ditch semester. If a student's going along well, and then they hit that first semester junior year, and maybe they put too much weight on themselves and they drop down a peg, their A's turn to B's, or maybe their B's turn to C's because they overloaded the rigor because they were trying to really show and challenge themselves. The first thing we say is all is not lost. All right. No matter where you are in this process, it's never all is lost. But if you do have a rough first semester, the first thing to do is see what went wrong, how to fix it. Should you be lightening up your extracurriculars? Should you not have a job? Should you be asking for help? Should you level down from an AP to a regular class? A lot of these things are about righting the ship. So when you first start out junior year, the first thing is, how are those classes going? Do I need to make any adjustments? And if I do have a rocky semester, how can I start out the second semester strongly? Because you guys have all heard of the term positive trending, which is when your grades are starting here and then they're kind of climbing up as you go. Some students can't do that because they're already kind of hitting the numbers that they want. And it's really just like their GPA is going up because of their number of APs. But at the end of the day, colleges are going to care increasingly more about the most recent semesters. So a freshman year, if that's rough, the colleges a lot of times will let go of that if the student does better in sophomore and junior year. The next one is, if a student has a rocky first semester junior year, they're almost certainly going to look at your first semester senior year and hold off on your application. So just to kind of give you guys an idea, what happens is in the old days, pre-COVID, you would send in your application and you would usually get accepted or rejected, and a handful of students would get waitlisted, right? And you guys think of that as like kind of like during COVID with like Trader Joe's, 1 in, 1 out. Like that's the way the wait list used to be, like 1 in, 1 out. Like if students said no, then they would let another student in. That's not the way wait lists work anymore. They wait list like a huge slew of people. It's almost like I say that when you're going on the 405 and then a cop does like one of those crazy turns to kind of do like a traffic break. That's what wait lists are used to do in the application process now. So a lot of students land on a wait list and they didn't expect it. And that's because they want to check everyone's first semester senior year grades. So that can be a positive for a lot of students. If they have a wobbly junior year and they come through senior year, then that can kind of resurrect things. So all I'm trying to say about the grades is that it is important that we do kind of prioritize that. And then it's also important to understand, no matter where you find yourself, there's always a way to kind of take corrective measures, and it will never be too late as long as you keep working, as you head into senior year. Someone just asked a pretty common question that we get a lot. Is it better to get an A in a regular class or a B in an AP or honors class? Our saying is, and this, I hope this doesn't kind of go against what you're hoping, but our motto is A's before APs. If you can get an A in AP or A in a lot of APs, great. If it's between getting A's in APs or B's in regular, more often than not, we would suggest you're kind of going for the A's, because when you get A's and it's in a regular class, you haven't shown your weakness yet. They're like, oh, he or she got an A in a regular class, maybe they can get an A or an AP. But if you start to pop B's and C's and APs, you basically showed you've hit your ceiling. And again, this is not the end of the day, because if you do get B's in, my son is in the shower right now because he's home from UCLA because he's like got like what they call the frat flu, even though he's not a fraternity, everyone's like dragging it all around. He had, I think, 4 B's and a C in his sophomore year, and he's at UCLA now on a scholarship. And so things can come around. It depends on how you handle the back 9, the second half. So I do want everyone to understand that. So if you're in AP, like a lot of kids are in APUSH, AP US History, and they find themselves struggling because a lot of those teachers are very, they want their information, and they maybe will scale down to regular history or a regular or another AP, and they scale down, and that's totally fine. And there's what's called additional information sections on the application, whether you're on the Common App or the UC app or not the Cal State app, but the Common App and the UC app, which covers 99% of the schools out there. There's a section you can say why you dropped a class down, why you shifted classes, why you didn't take classes. And our philosophy is always take those opportunities when you're explaining or making an excuse for something, flip it into a positive. I dropped down so I could be more balanced. Colleges love the concept of balance. I switched my class so I could follow something I was more interested in. And so there's ways to turn negatives into positives constantly in this process, as long as you're trying to find the true balance. Before I move to testing, I want to just hand the microphone out there. Does anyone have any questions about classes in junior year that they might be curious about? And you could just unmute your microphone and just ask. I'm totally okay with that. Like, is it okay if we drop a foreign language because my daughter's having trouble in French? Or is it okay to scale this down? Or is it okay that we don't have a science in junior year, or anything like that anyone wants to ask? I mean, obviously we can always answer this privately, but if there's something you have, I want to answer now. No? All right, that was easy. Oh, yeah, Jennifer. You're on mute. I can't hear you. There you go.
Okay. Do APs matter senior year?
Yeah, so what happens is, that's actually a good question because it's kind of like a split answer. If a student is tracking along really well and they don't put any APs on their senior year, the college is probably going to say, why aren't they challenging themselves? And that may kind of reduce the ceiling of their possibilities, but it's not going to like wipe them out. It'll just probably maybe take out some of the top ones. But with that said, colleges do not, because I know a lot of parents say to me, oh, she's taking 3 APs senior year, so that's going to raise her GPA. I always have to remind people that the GPA that goes off to the colleges is finalized in November. Like every class you have by November or December, whenever you send your application, is all they're going to see for your calculated GPA, 3.75, 4.2. The senior year courses get reported after the application has been submitted, after they have that formal GPA, and now they're just seeing how you're trending after that GPA comes in. So it never gets recalculated into a new GPA. But if they don't see that you're pushing yourself senior year, then they're going to say like, why not? The best case scenario is a student will take the same level or higher level of rigor from junior to senior year. Same or higher. Yep, Jen?
So, if you go from 4 APs and you figure that that's a little bit much, and you drop to 2 your senior year, how is that going to be perceived? Is it, saying, oh, I decided I want to balance myself out, or,
I would actually say if that student was, pockmarking with Bs and, maybe even Cs with that heavy AP load, and then they went to a reduced AP load and then knocked it out of the park, that student did themselves a big service. I'll tell you why. I remember I was talking to an admissions officer at Berkeley one time, and I had the student, this is, when we were sitting next to the student, and we called up on speakerphone, and I was talking to this admissions officer I had kind of formed a little bit of a working relationship with. And I told her about the student sitting next to me and how, the student was concerned if they dropped their APs, would that look bad at Berkeley? And a lot of these admissions officers will just tell you the truth. They're not trying to hide behind like, veils of secrecy. And she goes, honestly, one of the biggest things we have trouble with here on campus, and this would go for most all colleges, is balance. Is these students don't know how to handle independence. They try to overload themselves, social lives. And when we see a student who's found a way to correct their balance, and actually maybe even talks about that in additional information, we see that as a positive signal, not a sign of weakness. So the kind of myth is that colleges want students who can carry the heaviest backpack up the highest hill. That's not the truth. Like the most APs, I always talk about like different high schools, and I'm not sure, I forget which school you guys are at, but I talk about my Peninsula students. They always look like that, like painting of the villagers carrying those giant bales of hay up like a really steep winding turn, because a lot of them think that just more is better. And a lot of times we're just like, let's dial a few things back. Let's make it successful. Because at the end of the day, colleges aren't wanting you to take 7 classes at their school, per semester. They're wanting you to take a balanced load and wanting to do well with it. So if you're able to exhibit that change from your junior year to senior year, that's going to be a win. Obviously, I always tell a student, if you only think you can handle 2 or maybe 3, maybe sign up for 3, sit in on your classes that first week of senior year, and then, make a decision after that if you need to drop one of them down. Like, in other words, maybe like scale it down a little bit, but maybe just see if you want to kind of try it. And then if you're like, after the first week, you're like, heck no, comp sci principles out, and then you just ditch it and then you move on. Yeah, Shelly?
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering if they see the scores on the AP tests, or what if you decide not to take a test, or you get a 1 or a 2? Like, how do the AP test scores influence the decisions?
That's a good question. Because a lot of schools have gone test optional, because they no longer use the SAT subject exam, SAT2 subject exams, which you guys may not even know about because they were faded out like a year and a half ago. they do look at AP scores if you report them, Shelley, but you do have the opportunity to not report them. So students will often, take 4 APs, 5 APs, only get 3 4s or 5s on 2 or 3 of the APs and only report those. And that, may or may not be seen negatively, because the school is going to maybe assume that the other AP wasn't, that you didn't do well on the other ones, but they will never see a bad AP score if you don't want them to. And I will say again, the kid in the shower over there, he got a 2 on his AP that he's majoring in, which is music theory. And it's because he just does stuff differently with music than like the theory. And he was able to get an interview and improve all that. But so APs, we say report 3s, 4s, and 5s. Do not report 1s and 2s. I have a lot of families that are just like, well, I don't want to report a 3. It's not high enough. I'm like, if you don't report a 3, they're going to think it's a 1 or a 2. So yeah, Holly.
Sorry.
Okay.
I forgot to ask about for testing. This is back, you already asked this, but for ACT testing, do you do the writing or not the writing?
Right. So let's jump into testing right now. We'll use this as a good segue. So as it says here, first of all, let's talk about the quick answer is no writing on SAT or ACT. Skip those sections.
Okay.
No schools want them.
Okay.
But let's even talk, like, let's back it up a second. Let's even talk about, like, is it even worth testing for your child, right? I think a lot of people think because, I run a test prep company that I'm saying like, oh, everybody should test, and like I should be cajoling everyone to test. We're the total opposite, not the total opposite, but we want everyone using their resources. And I mean that as in energy, finances, time, anything you can put into that category in the right way. So if a student is going to take an ACT or an SAT and it's not going to actually add to their overall power, then that would be something where you would there would be something that I don't even know who your son is, to be honest. So at the end of the day, it's something where you have to really look at your test scores and you have to figure out which of your, if it's worth your going in and taking a test. When you look at, like, I'll bring up the Blue List, which is our search engine that we built. Some of you guys know this already. And I'll just open up a school and I'll say here, let's pick a school that a lot of kids apply to. I'll pick Boulder because it's not as intense as like Michigan. So when you see these numbers here, this is the center 50th percentile. If a student can't break this lower number for the majority of schools that they're aiming for, then they should not be applying. I mean, they should not be testing, because then you're probably putting a lot of energy into something that is, probably not going to pay off the way you want it to. I have families all the time that will say, but I really want my son to take it, or I really want my daughter to take the test. And what I say all the time is, okay, do they want to take it? And if I sit with a student and the student's like, yeah, I really want to take it, and I really just want to get it done, then go for it. If a student isn't sure and they take a diagnostic and they're not hitting those numbers, then we might say, let's just move that to the back. Let's focus on your GPA. Let's focus on your activities. Let's get the other parts of yourself up. What I do, I do see people get better over the course of time. So remember when I was talking about doing things ahead of time, a lot of families like want to take the ACT or SAT and quote, get it over with. If you ever talk to, Trisha in our office, she's not on here, but or Brooke or Laurel, they'll say something like, there is no such thing as getting it over with. You're just trying to rush it. You're better off slowing it down. So when I look at students and I look at their timeline, this here is the general timeline of testing over the course of junior and senior year. Right now, we're in November over here on the left side. This is before we would ever suggest a student to take a test. You might have friends who have children your child's age, and they may already say that they're prepping with a company and they're taking a test, and that might make you nervous. We would say let the fools rush in. We really do believe that December is the earliest we would prefer our children to be taking the test, because A, they get stronger as they go. They get more comfortable with their junior year performance, and they start to kind of worry less about their grades so they can focus on the second part, which are tests. These test dates here, February for the ACT and March for the SAT, tend to be the most common first exams in the past. These days, a lot of students are taking their first ACT in April. But of course, as we know, May can be AP season, and a lot of students are overwhelmed by that part of their life. So every single student's going to be different. If I have a student who's doing spring musical, they may want to do something different. If a student is doing, a fall sport or a winter sport, or a spring sport, that may affect them. Or if they have 4 APs and they know that April is going to be really rough, all those things may affect them. But the first thing is to just make sure that they've, I think one of the things is that we notice is that too many families do not take the time to actually look at the difference between the two tests. They will just kind of hear on the street that ACT is better or SAT is better, or their older brother or sister did one and they do the same thing. In the end, the best thing that you can do is take an abbreviated test, which is a shortened SAT and a shortened ACT, PSAT versus a plan. Compare those. I know that at your school, they're going to offer you like a Compass exam or a Study Hut exam that's going to be 3.5 hours, 3 to 4 hours, whatever it's going to be. And the problem with that is a lot of students die on the vine. They start doing the test, and then halfway through, they're like, oh my God, this is like 3.5 hours. And then their reading is the first thing that plummets. And then they get this really low reading or science score if it's the ACT, and they feel terrible. And they go, oh, not going to test. We'll take that same student and sometimes give them the short tests where they can really just kind of like do a sprint on it and just see how they do. And the score pops up. At the end of the day, we don't want a false low or a false high. We want a score that actually represents the student's ability. And then if they want to move forward with testing, then they choose, what to do after that. So step one, yeah. Jen? I can't hear you.
Do you have the abbreviated tests that we could access?
Yeah, if you look at the document here.
Okay. Oh, the
where
open
it's-
house.
Yeah, it
Oh,
says click
okay.
for diagnostic tests. They will send you a test, and then they'll also send you like a test calculator so you can score the test immediately. You
Okay.
don't have to even, and then if you want to reach out for advice or set up meet, whatever you need to do, and then when they send it to you, they're also going to send you this score conversion table. So
Now,
just
lengthwise, how long is that compared to the normal test? Just a
2 hours and 10 and 2 hours and 20. So
Okay.
it still takes a little bit of time, but the sections are only like 20 minutes, 30 minutes each, as you know. So I think the ACT plan might be like just 2 hours. So what the students will do a lot of times, and I don't care. I've been doing testing for, let me count it up now. I've been doing test prep for 28 years. So like I've been around the block on this stuff. And a lot of people are like, well, it's not an accurate score if the student doesn't do a full test all at once. And I'm going, if we're getting closer to the test and we're trying to kind of see how their performance is going, because there's two different things. There's skills and there's performance. Skills are, what do I know? What do I not know? Performance is, how do I perform under pressure and under time constraints? Those are two different things. So the first thing that we're trying to assess is, we're not trying to assess their performance, because that can always be built up. We're trying to assess their skills. Which test is this student better suited for? The differences are, the ACT is faster. Okay, so if you have a child that's more of a plodder, Plodder, not a plotter, a plodder, they will tend to not like the ACT as much because it's fast, but the ACT is also easier. So the ACT goes up to a lower level math. The reading passages are more transparent when you're doing them. So if you're someone that can, read, you guys know that game like where they stack cups really fast on like some kind of like ESPN or something like that. Like no one knows what I'm talking about. But there's like, like speed games. That's the ACT. How fast can you do something? Where can you find it in the passage? Can you find the right answer? Move on, move on. 4 passages, 40 minutes, 10 minutes per passage is fast. SAT, the math goes up to pre-calc, so it's a little bit harder. The reading passages are more dense. The grammar questions sometimes will take the whole context of the passage, not just a sentence. So it's a more thoughtful exam that can't be rushed, but it does go deeper. But you may not even know which one your student's better at. And a lot of times students will come out pretty even. If they come out pretty even, sometimes what I'll do is I'll say, like when we go and we do a, we look at their exam scores and say that here, I'll use the big ones here. So say like the reading and writing, a student has a 560, and math, they have like a 650. And then over here, they have about the same. Part of it is not, I don't want to make all the numbers, but part of it is not only what the total score is, but how the breakdown shakes out, because some sections are easier to improve on others. Science and reading on the ACT are performance sections. So even if skills are a little bit lower, those can be moved up with like prepping up speed, getting the shortcuts down, understanding how to see through things quickly, getting better, like understanding pressure. And then English and math are more skill sections. Here, it's a little bit trickier on the SAT because the way things are intertwined, they intertwine the reading and the English together, but we can kind of disambiguate it and look at it with the family. That's what meet and greets are for, is really to kind of help families go through that. So if you haven't done a meet and greet and you are going to test, we recommend doing the meet and greet after you've done the practice exams, so you can have someone actually help you look at that information and really kind of like sift through it. And then again, it's also great not to pull the student out of the process and really just talk with, dude, which one did you like better? Well, I hated this one. All right, then maybe we should talk about the other one. But I scored better on the one I didn't like. Well, why didn't you like it? The science section was really weird. Everybody says that on the first time. Try it again. Try it untimed. We do all these things to try to acclimate people. But then at the end of the day, a good percentage of students decide not to test. That's the truth. I actually think test optional is good. I think test blind is bad. That's what the UCs do, where they don't look at anything. I don't like that. I think test mandatory is bad. Everybody's got to test. I think test optional is great. It allows people to shine in the way they want to. Now the question is, do you, if you're a student on the call, or does your child want to test? And that will all be, based on how they do. The next question families always ask is, how much does it help? Okay, how much can it help? Well, it can help a student quite a bit if they have a rocky transcript. Like say a student has like A's and B's and C's and they've been going up and down, that objective test score can be a leveler. It can help. It can help people who are really at the highest level of their grades and they're looking for that cherry on top to move into the upper tier of schools, whether it's the Ivies or the top liberal arts schools like Amherst or Haverford or whatever schools you're looking at. But a lot of students have gotten into top schools without test scores. And so it is not a do or die situation with testing. It's a choice and a use of your resources. And again, resources is emotional too. It's not just time. It's like how much energy. I have some students that are just like, oh, I just think about it. It stresses me out. It worries me. It worries my parents. I'm doing tutoring. It's costing money. And all that stress kind of adds up. And the last thing we want to do is be adding stress. So there are a few schools that are test mandatory. There aren't many. University of Georgia, a couple of the Florida schools, MIT. So you do have to make sure you're not kind of, missing out on any of those. Unfortunately, the class of 2024, the colleges haven't released their test blind or test mandatory aspects yet. They're still in the middle of kind of making those decisions. But the last thing I'll say before I move out of testing is December tests are probably the earliest that we see, and those are really only for what we call the precocious testers, students who already know that they feel pretty good about their practice tests. They're feeling like they can go in and do it. Their first semester is under control. Everyone else, don't rush. Don't let the other people at school that are taking the test or walking around with their 1,500 t-shirts, like don't like ignore them. Okay. One of the things I always, and I tell this to parents too, my parents that, you know, hear other parents talking, they're the ones that get the most toxicity inside them. And I'm always trying to like help them kind of just like deflect that stuff. The process can be done lots of different ways. One of the things that we try to do is work with the natural rhythms of the student and the process and not try to impose anything on them. A lot of prep companies want to catch families early and say, you got to test now. You got to prep over the summer between junior and senior year. You got to get your first SAT. First SAT done before their first PSAT. It makes no sense, but that's how they capture people. We're not a fan of that at the end of the day. No, the UCs are done. They're not. The UCs are test blind, at least for the foreseeable future. Someone just asked. So are there any questions that I can answer about testing before I move on to the other parts, which I'll just do a quick talk about activities, passion projects, all those things. Testing, yeah.
Even if the UC systems are test blind, is there a benefit if you've taken your SAT to show your scores in the optional section or whatever else you can call it?
There's a mixed, there's like a mixture of points of view on that. Last year, the UCs kept the space on the application for the test scores, even though they were test blind. And I was telling every student who had a good score, drop it in there. That was even though admissions officers say, like, the UC's admissions officers, I don't know if they drink the Kool-Aid, but suddenly they think the SAT and ACT are the devil. And they're like, to even mention them is like an affront to them. Last year, when they had the spaces provided, I told students to do it. Now that the spaces are not provided, I tell them not to mention it. Unless they want to, unless a student has this particular situation, like say that their grades aren't that good, and they did want to kind of say, hey, you know, my grades weren't that good. I was a little bit of a late start, but I did really well on this test and I'm kind of proud of it. Like an earnest kind of statement in the additional information, but out of probably, I'll just make up an off the cuff stat. I'll say out of 10 students that want to do that, I'd probably only say it would be a good idea for like 1 or 2 of them. So it's not like something I would say as a, you know, pat response. Yes, like flaunt your score. I would say only do it if it kind of seemed like it wouldn't upset them and it was something that needed to be done, you know, because of like a lower. But for the other schools, like Michigan loves test scores. A lot of the out-of-state publics love test scores because it helps them. A lot of schools that have students that are all in the same GPA range. Like you look at schools like Boston College, Boston University, you know, Northeastern, they have a lot of kids hitting the same 4.2 range or whatever it might be. And those schools, we will see like an uptick with the students that send in scores. So again, if we look at this, you know, the blue list scores that we have here, if you're above the 75th percentile mark for any school, that's obviously something that's going to be like really positive for that school, because then that means that they're going to actually see their numbers rising if they take enough of these students that are above that. I have, you know, we had so many students right before early action, even though we've had this conversation 1,000 times with them. Should I send it? Should I not send it? Students get all twitchy about it. Test scores aren't going to hurt you unless they are below the number. If it's above that number, it may not help, but it's not going to hurt. So like one of the things is we say is just look at that bottom number. And just so you know, that just means that they report that, range there. So if that range is getting pulled down, the schools don't like that, right? They don't want to go from a 25 to a 24 the next year. So some students will even only feel safe submitting scores if it's at least 1 point or like, a few points above the 25th percentile, because they know there's a margin of error and they're trying to go at. But we can always help families estimate that once the scores roll in. Any other test score questions, or test timeline questions? How many times you take the test? In the old days, it was 3 or 4 times because students really knew they needed it and it was a big part of their process. Now students will usually take the test between 1 and 3 times. Some students will just give it a shot, and if it doesn't stick, they're done. But a lot of students will still go through the hustle in 2 or 3 times. And I always say to our students, and we have a whole test prep team, they often say the same thing. They, again, I might have sounded cheesy in the beginning when I was talking about like the college process as being like a beautiful thing, but I do mean it. And I also think a certain way that testing is too, because we see students that they get over their test anxiety, they build their skills, they perform better under pressure. And I've talked to a lot of my test prep team, and they'll say, I was so proud of so and so. I was so proud of so and so because they just put the hustle in there. They got their score. It was one more shiny gold coin to put on their application. It was a long road. Obviously, there's payoffs and pros and cons, risks and rewards. But if a student is willing to go for it and they do put in the hustle, it's usually 2 or 3 exams for a student who's trying to really like move their score up. A one test tester is usually somebody who either got their score, which happens, or somebody who kind of just said, you know what, this isn't for me anymore. But we can always move on to that. But so let's move on to, because we don't have too much time. And then prepping. Usually we encourage families to start prepping 6 or 8 weeks from their first exam. And we also encourage families not to over prep for the first exam. Save your energy for the second or third exam, because too many students, try to do everything on their first test and then they get their score back and then they have no hours left to prep. They have no gas left in the tank, because a lot of times that first test is, we call it the first pancake test. No matter how nice you make the batter, no matter how hot the frying pan is with the butter sizzling, a lot of times the first pancake sucks. It's the truth. A lot of times the first test you take sucks too. So why put all your energy and all your resources in to kind of throw them against the wall like that? So we want people to prep enough so they can walk in, give it their best go. And people always say, what's a good first test? I say a good first test is trying your hardest in all 4 sections, not quitting before the buzzer, making sure you employ everything that you can remember in test day, and then see how it comes out, and then pick up the pieces, and then you can build up from there. I find that to be a more productive process than students or families spending months and months and months preparing for that first test to try to get a one and done. It just doesn't happen that way. So it's better to, get your strength and skills up, but then also leave space to know that you very well may test again and maybe again. And a lot of students won't do all their tests in one season. A lot of students will do the spring exams, maybe 1 or 2, and then do 1 or 2 tests in the fall. So if they do 3 exams, they might do 2 here and 1 there, or 1 here and 2 there. You can take tests all the way up till December of your senior year. So not that we want to be taking a lot of tests, but at least you know that if you kick the can down the road's pretty long. All right. Open house. Next things. So this, I think, is, I just want to kind of go over these things in kind of pretty short order. At Blue Train, I think one of the things that we're the most excited about with students is a lot of this stuff here. because these are things that are really kind of not only about the college process, but as I said in the beginning, they're about the student's personal growth. So in the beginning, like when we're looking at a school, we take students and, obviously we, we know about all these schools, we know about the social life, we take them on their, the Google Earth tours, and we can kind of talk them about majors, we talked about programs. I'll go in and I'll, be showing the students the engineering quadrangle, or I'll kind of show them how close they are to the mountains, or I'll, drop them in on Pearl Street Mall, or, all these different things you can do with tech these days is pretty amazing. And, obviously it doesn't replace going to the campus, but we can learn quite a bit by this. Then students will go, we have 10,000 videos that we curated from YouTube. So there's, there's all these different playlists. We start out with the overviews of the campus, and then they go down towards the majors, etc. We have, there's scatter shots of all the schools, so the students will kind of get a sense of, like the beauty of the school, and we kind of like go around. It's a very pretty school, by the way. And we go through that. There's lots of information, whether it's some of them, there's live cams at some of the campuses, the weather, there's usually radio stations for all the schools. We have course catalogs. So if a student wants to go here and wants to look at what the courses are in, computer science, they can just go here and look at all the courses at the school. And that's obviously extremely helpful. Here, this will tell the students how many spaces per major there are, so we can kind of see how competitive things are. And, this is the amount of students that they accept per year per major. Then as the students start going in, they will, there's all the reviews, there's thousands of reviews here. There's the campus activities, the guided tours, all this stuff. And having jumped around so much, and also we talk to a lot of students at these schools, we do that. And then the students are able to take notes. So say, for example, the student, liked the anthropology major. So we're able to go boom, and then go anthropology. If I can spell, and they could just put the courses there, boom, boom. And now that student can save and close that. And now they have all their information. Anytime they want to open up, like here's University of Washington, would have another, thing here. And then the student then puts together their list. They save it in this, which is their save list, which now kind of sorts it by these red zone GPAs, which we calculate based on our South Bay kids. The low end for these schools doesn't mean you can't get in with lower than this, but this really helps students kind of, understand what's a reach school, a target school, and a safe school. And we encourage them to make a floor and a ceiling so that they kind of know their bounds. Of course, they can go above and below, but we kind of like help them figure that out. And then the cool thing is, once a student makes the list, they can then click this and it exports. This takes about 10 seconds. This will export their entire list with all the other information they need onto a tracking sheet that will pop up in a second. And this, or is it? Is it working? Yeah. So now this information has now moved all into this tracking sheet. So now the student will be able to, all the deadlines have come through. So the student will know if they're ED, and they can just select all their deadlines, make a timeline. This is all the essays for all the colleges with their supplemental prompts. They kind of, all the letters of rec should be sent as well, so they know that. Then once they do that, they go to the second tab, and this goes in time order. This kind of sets their timeline of how they do things. Then over here, this will, for their scholarships, for their honors programs. Then once they submit their applications, they can track what's been received, and then the parents can track the finances of things on this page. This is, yeah, 1 second, Jen. This is the one part of it. The other part is, because I know you guys see our old cruddy website that's up. You're probably like, how does this company survive on this website? We have a new website that's built. This is it. You know, which everything is all kind of, you know, getting put in place. But it has, you know, there's going to be lots of stuff here. You know, when students come here, they will be able to kind of like look everything up, etc. In addition to that, we're creating, this is under construction right now, which is a portal where every student, the website will be up in about 6 weeks because it's almost done. And the portal will be up in like 2 or 3 months. But this will enable students, you know, every student will have a notification of their to-dos and their, you know, notes, like what is there. Then they will have their academics, so we can track all their courses and kind of keep notes with them as they go. Their SAT, ACT score, they can keep track, they can move them up and down as they progress. Activities, one of the things that we really do find is important is for students to start thinking about not only what activities they're doing, but how to express those on the application, because that's a big part of the application. So we're going to have students start to kind of build their activity lists before they even start their application. So when it does come time to you know, create their activity list, they'll have it all here. They will have their colleges, which will connect to the Blue List, and they'll be able to kind of explore and everything and keep that stuff there. Their essays will have scratch sheets. The calendar will have the Blue Train calendar and their calendar. And then their resources, you'll be able to get all the newsletters, the town hall recordings as we go. And then you will have, you know, your account. That will be up in a short time. But right now, the Blue List is all functioning for everyone. Families can start exploring on that. And I'll talk about activities in a second. Now, Jen, what was your question? Sorry, I made you held down for a second.
Can you hear me? Oh, I was just wondering, I was on the Blue List. I saw a little like lock. Is this a membership only or website?
Well, once people sign up for Blue Chain, then they get it. Are you signed up already?
My daughter is taking the SAT class right now that sits in December with Blue Train.
Okay, so
You guys.
okay, once she starts her class, she'll get her Blue List login.
She already,
If you
she already started. She's on the Sunday.
Oh, okay.
10 o'clock.
So, maybe I can check. Class students, they may have taken that off as a freebie, but I'll just have them send it to you.
Okay.
Just because you're here. Yeah, because you showed up. So I'll make sure that they send that to you tomorrow.
Okay.
And I'll make a note of that.
Cool.
Yeah, but it's not open to the public, just so you know. It's only for Blue Trainers, and we also give it to underserved communities for the counselors to use in the high schools for their students. So it's like our students and them. Obviously, not only, you know, a lot of companies will white label a search engine, so they're using something. We not only did we design it, we did all the data in it. We're writing all the descriptions. So like the team of people that you're working with, whether it's Matt, Celeste, David, Daniel, or whomever, they're actually ones that are doing all this research. So like our brains are like London City cab drivers with all these schools. Like we kind of like know the ins and outs, and it makes us a lot faster. Yeah, Ashish.
Yeah, I put a question on the chat.
Yeah.
Can you tell us how Blue Train helps with the essays and what resources you guys provide, and what is the ratio of counselor to the student?
Yeah, sure. Let's do something really quickly. I mean, I was going to get to the essays and applications after, but let me give you guys. All right, so I'm going to read you guys super quickly the winner of this year's essay contest, and I'll explain how we get here. So this is one of our students that wrote this essay this year. It'll only take like 3 minutes for me to read, but just kind of tell you, this is a personal statement. This is just one of many amazing ones. So we have a packet of like, I don't know, like 60 pages of our students' essays. This is just one of them. Beads of sweat drip down my face as I watch my last teammate be taken out by a Nerf bullet. I'm peeking through a fortress of sorts, a mesh of bed frames and guest room pillows reinforced by cotton blankets, torn cardboard boxes, and stacked chairs. It's now a 1 versus 5 in this basement battle royale I've organized for my initially very reluctant family. With final desperate determination, I leap over my fallen cousin and fire at my uncle, yelling at the tops of my lungs in an exhilarating roar for my life. I can't read right now. And yet, even in this peak of adrenaline, my focus lingers elsewhere, on those joyous smiles painted across my family's faces. Over the span of that one magical second, I realized I had passed into what I call an interspace. As I tumbled to the floor, I tried to hold on to every detail of this otherworldly world where time and space stop. My grandma cheering in the background, my uncle, red-faced with victorious laughter, grasping at the fleeting beauty of this instant before it floats off into the night air. For I know, no matter how hard I seek them out, interspaces are the rarest of life's gifts. It's pouring outside. Squeaky wet shoes continue to flood into the language classroom, but inside our Chinese Honor Society New Year celebration has remained quite uncelebratory. I survey the silent, fragmented groups of California sophomores and foreign exchange students and force a nervous smile to my co-president. How do we fix this? At the risk of appearing ridiculous or worse, annoying, I hop around and begin interacting with everyone, and then slowly it begins. First in pods with little greetings and mistranslated jokes tossed around. I can almost feel language barriers disintegrating as the small talk grows into a steady hum, and then into rolling waves of merry buzz. I want to freeze time, analyze how the sparkling eyes and discordant accents drifting upon the familiar sense of steeping oolong tea and microwave mooncakes have interwoven with the memories of many happy Chinese New Years with my family to create this rare and shared interspace. My orchestra friends and I are taking some downtime to play anime songs after a nonstop rehearsals of Rachmaninoff Trio for a concert next week. As we crescendo into the finale of Merry-Go-Round of Life and hit the last phrase together, the room fills with a rich, transcendent beauty that gives me chills, and then silence. We sit for a moment to process what we just created together. Reese looks stupefied. Philip and I grin with incredulity. You can hear the last waves of the finale chord echo up through the hall and around the corner. Although I have played the cello most of my life, it took the right friends and the right moment to compose a true and lasting interspace. And it is at that moment I understand that interspaces are gifts of timing and circumstance, but they are not gifts given freely. They must be earned, selflessly built on the foundations of friendship, culture, and family. As I sit here, these beautiful moments, family nerf wars, music with friends, celebrations of culture, are fading into the depths of my memory. I want to hold on to them forever, to pretend I'm still in those interspaces, but I know my experiences will outpace them. And so I live life searching for more of these interspaces, these shimmering moments that paint my night sky. Monopoly nights on campus, volleyball with friends, I can see it now, the smiles and the laughter right out of my reach and ready to be discovered. And maybe one day, when I found the people in the communities that make my life meaningful, I will look back and see how beautiful my constellation of interspaces has become. So that's a personal statement, okay? It's a very pretty, nice personal statement that started out the exact same way that all of our students do. They all show up to, and this goes to your question, they show up to our personal statement workshop, which I usually teach. In addition to running Blue Chain, I'm a professional screenwriter with some success under my belt. And so I'm used to writing every day almost. And so when I talk to students about writing, it's not just about like, what do the admissions officers want? It's like, let's hit the mold on how to write a high school essay with a sledgehammer and teach them how to write in a different way. That means understanding that it's not a 5-paragraph essay with a thesis sentence and topic sentences. It's about expressing yourself. So we really kind of motivate them. We encourage everyone to do this one workshop, which is sometimes it's 20, 25 kids in the class. But after that, then they move on individual. A lot of students will use one-on-one tutoring and just work with their single essay specialist through the whole process. Some families want to save money and do what are called writing labs, where over the course of 3 hours, a specialist will rotate between 3 students in that writing lab. So there are, like we say, we give the price points to do it, just the workshop, take that home. Here's the advice. Here's all these great essays that have won tons of scholarships and all these accolades. Like that's how we do it. We give them structural types. Like we kind of have just like genres of movies. We have genres of essays, and students start to get the language. Oh, I'm going to do a vertical with horizontals, or I'm going to do a mimic essay, or whatever the type of essay they're going to do. And then they have these comparison essays, like interspaces or ecosystem or fruity pebbles or whatever the name of the essay is. And so that when they're communicating with us, like we're all speaking the same language. We know what these essays are. We talk about transitions. We talk about kind of being a good community citizen. But depending on what the family's budget is, or however much they want to spend, because obviously it takes time to do essays. Essays are the biggest time consumer of the entire college process. You know, and besides your GPA and besides your activities, when you're actually talking about building your application, the essays take the most, because there's a personal statement, then there's the 4 UC Insight questions, and then there's the supplements, which are individual essays that each school is asking. So when I brought up that that spreadsheet earlier, here, and I went to this first page here, this here is for every school. So like you pick a school, we'll say, you know, Boston College. So you have to do all these essays, or this one, just pick one of them, but all of these schools will have extra essays on top. So after the main essay for the Common App, then these little essays. And these change every year. So we have to go through on the day that they get released and update all this stuff. So the students have everything, you know, at the disposal. They know how many. And then what we do is we kind of, our goal is what we call our on-track sessions. On-track sessions, a lot of times, are taking someone's whole complexity of all the things they have to do on the application and putting it into organization. For example, in an hour on-track session, we might take a student who's kind of got their college list, but then they don't know what's next. We'll get all their deadlines. We'll make all that timeline. We'll prioritize the earliest deadlines, so the ones that were also hinged on merit scholarships, so you don't miss any merit scholarship opportunities. Then we take all their school supplements, we put them in order with their timeline, so they can start kind of working on things in the order, and they can see all their supplements at one time in case there's overlaps, and there's always overlaps. You end up using the same essay a lot of different times. It's like making turkey sandwiches with all the different pieces. But at the end, the students become better writers. They learn. And one of the things that I always say is to our essay specialist team. Our essay specialist team is the biggest team at Bluetree, because it also takes a lot of time to work on these. And a lot of them are professional writers or PhDs or whatever. But the main thing is they all love writing. And so when we're sitting with your students, we're not redlining and penning everything up. It's like, all right, see how you went from this paragraph to the next? You kind of did the high school thing where you tried to make the paragraph, like you re-summarized the paragraph. Now you're introducing the next paragraph. That's a spoiler alert. Don't do that. Like, just cut the paragraph off here, leave it open, answer it with the opposite direction. And we teach them how to do these things. And students go, oh, that's cool. And then they start to make these beautiful essays. That interspaces essay was a nightmare. That kid was not what he would say a self-congratulatory good writer. He's like, I can't write. I talked to him for 2 hours while I was driving on the highway someplace, and he was just like having a nervous breakdown. And I was just like saying, let's try this again. And he just is like a testament to how important these essays are to these kids. Like when we do an exit survey, we say, what do you think was the most important part of your essay, your application, besides your grades? Almost 9 out of 10 say the essay. So when you're thinking about the college process as parents, college list is very important. Essays are very important. Those are 2 things that are kind of like, can't really get around either of those, you know, because you can't make a bad list. You can't do all this work and make a bad list. And what's a bad list? A bad list might just be like not really knowing what you're going for. Maybe you're just kind of picking names of schools and you don't know if they're the right social fit. Maybe you're just picking a major. Like I ran into someone the other day when I was out with some friends, and the mom's like, hey, I heard you do college stuff. My daughter's, you know, applying to all these criminal justice schools. And I said, criminal justice or criminology? And she said, what's the difference? I go, oh, criminal justice is about, you know, police reform and prison reform. And she's like, no. And I go, yeah, your daughter probably wants like CSI and that kind of stuff, like solve the crime, true crime. And she's like, yeah, I got criminology. And she's like, oh shit. You know, like, excuse my French, but she was like, oh my God. And I said, yeah, here's some criminology or forensic science ones at Maryland, at Syracuse and stuff like that. So part of it is finding a good college list and then emphasizing your best self through your essays. So this is going to, and I'm going to try to wrap this up in the next 10 minutes because we're all hungry. Because, you know, the thing about it is when we start to think about activities, because I think that's what a lot of students do. And a lot of students think about activities in terms of, you know, National Charity League, Los Hermanos, Girl Scouts, you know, all those things. And those are great. You know, I'm not going to say they're not great. But the number one missed opportunity of students is the things that they could be doing on their own outside of school. Okay. When COVID hit and everyone was doing like swim team on Zoom and all these other things that was just like ridiculous, colleges really started to see how many students were building a computer on their own, were going out and observing the stars with their telescope. I had a student recently who's he ended up at Berkeley for astronomy, but his mom was like, we don't have the money to send him to all these great programs. And then I was like, go on Craigslist, look for a used telescope. And he got one for like under $100. And then he started to like look at the sky and track it. He wrote some beautiful supplementals, his personal statement, his activities, all just because he bought a $100 telescope. But he started investing himself into it and thinking through it. Have a girl this year who I think is one of the funniest stories. She loved fashion, but her whole family said she was going to be a mechanical engineer, and she loves mechanical engineering as well. And she's like, is there anything I could do to put them together? I was like, I don't know. What about like a sewing machine you sew? She's like, no. So you know what she did? She bought a sewing machine from 1890, literally. It wasn't even that expensive, refurbished it and put a computer component in it and was able to do this cool thing. And like, that is all a project. There's nobody's signing off on her hours. She's not going there. She's doing this on her own. And so the saying that we say is an authentic application goes farther than a fabricated one. Fabricated ones are the ones where everyone's just trying to like look good for the I hear this all the time. What looks good for college? I said, be your best self. And they're like, oh, that's a crappy answer, but it's the truth. So a lot of times when we have a student that's saying, I really like fashion, or I really like video games, rather than it being a parent that says like, video games are the devil, don't do it. It's like, maybe learn how to use Scratch or one of these things where you can make your own video game. Maybe try to, understand how to do editing off a video gameplay video. Like, what can you do to dive into your passion? Because that passion is probably often related to your major as well, or it may not be. But one of the best things you can do for your application is show interest in something that you might be applying for. And this especially goes for the engineers and the comp sci and the bio kids, because those are the three high tier majors that are a little bit more impacted. They're also high resource, meaning that they can't just expand the size of the program, at the snap of a finger. So what we're always trying to do is really to say, and by the way, if your child is working on their schoolwork, the last thing you want to be doing is like, I know you have all those APs, but why don't you refurbish an 1890s sewing machine and put a computer component, because the head will explode. Like, there are times to step on the gas and there are times to not step on the gas. I think with first semester junior year, which all your students, unless you're younger and they're a sophomore, I think first semester junior year, really right now, the priority is the coursework. As you start to loosen up, and someone will be like, is it too late to do anything? When you're doing, like one of the things that I showed here, and the reason why we built our portal where is it? Where's my portal? Nope. Where did I put it? I don't know where I put my portal. But one of the things that I did with the portal, the goal of that was to make sure that students could have a kind of a hierarchy ability on the activities. What does that mean? Picture you have like 20 boxes, like top down, and they're all movable. Okay. And say that you're really interested in astronomy lately, and you have these movable boxes, ding, 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 move that one to the top because that's the one you're most interested. Put notes or keep track of things that you're doing in there. Because what happens is when you get to the applications, it's not only the activities that you report, it's the hierarchy order that you put them in. So if I only do something like for the summer between junior and senior year, which a lot of people think is too late, they're like, whoa, well, that won't matter. I didn't do it for 4 years. I didn't show commitment. It's not what it's about. Colleges want to see kind of what you're into, what you prioritize. So if you suddenly realized that you love marine biology because you took a marine biology class at the, I mean, I love my marine biology, you can see all my tanks everywhere. But if you found out that you love this, right, and you start to kind of really find, it starts to catch fire with you, then even if you've only done it for 2 months and you move it to the top of your hierarchy, you're sending a signal to the school that this is my priority. I may have done something for 4 years, but I'm going to put that lower because I want to show you how much, and people don't do that. We have final app reviews all the time where we do a walkthrough of the student's app and double check everything all the time. And students have, because they did it on their own, they didn't do a workshop, whatever, and that's fine too. Like, well, we'll take anyone and help them wherever they are in the process, even if it's just someone that comes in cold, as long as we have space, which we usually don't have right before the apps go out. But if we do that, a lot of times people just put what they think the school wants to see at the top, which is something you started in 9th grade and did through 12th, but that's not the truth. And we always say to students, move those hierarchies up and down. If it's something that it's late to the party, but it's something you're passionate about, move it to the top. That will send the signals to the school. So a lot of times when we have meet and greets with families, one of the things that I say in the meet and greet, because a lot of parents are like, well, what can he or she do to kind of improve their, application process? And one of the things I say to the student is, if you could do anything you wanted to that was aligned with your interest, what would you do? I was working with a student the other day and he said, build a ball socket joint for a leg of a robot that was like functional. And I'm like, it's over my head, but cool. So, maybe start trying to figure out how to do that. Or, another student will say, I want to better understand the stock market. Great. Get a Market Watch fake account, start playing with stocks, build up understanding, because activities go on the activity list, but you know where else they go? In those supplemental essays. Remember I showed you guys all those essays? Those pretty much are going to be like populated by the things that your students have had experiences with and care about. Not just the mission trip to Mexico to build a house, not just the making the sandwiches for homeless. Those are all super important as well, but also what they're doing for their own intellectual curiosity, how they're satisfying it. And again, it doesn't matter if it's video games or social media, whatever it is, like just have the student. And then a lot of times we get off the phone call and students won't have, exactly what they want, but you can see their wheels turning. And then we'll get an email or a text or a call. Yeah, is this a good idea? And we're like, it's a great idea because the student came up with it. It's something that they want to do. But sometimes you have to look your son or daughter in the eye and you say, look, because a lot of families are willing to put money into things where they think that helps the college process, but then they're like, should we put it into a class? Should we do this? And if I have a student that's like, I want to go into comp sci, I want to build a PC, I want to build it from scratch, and the motherboard, put it all together, do all that stuff. I want to put the memory card. I want to understand, I want to research it. That costs however much it's going to cost, a few $100s. But that experience could be more impressive than going away for 6 weeks to a summer class at Stanford or something like that. You may not think it is, but that's how the colleges are seeing this stuff. Because a class, for the most part, you're a passive participant. Internships, you're a little more active, and hands-on research, you're a little more active. But when you're doing things on your own and you actually can document it and show progress and do things, you're going to be kind of doing exactly what they want you to be doing. So that's just something, and I don't want everyone to kind of look at their kids and go, how come you're not doing something? It's really just about now, what would you, it's more of a question. What would you do if mom or dad gave you a couple of $100? These here for my son, and usually his keyboards behind me, that was my investment in his intellectual curiosity. So whatever your investment is, it may not be anything. It might just be something the kid just, even going on YouTube and watching documentaries about history is an activity, all these things. So I always tell people, really just push hard on the things that you're interested in. The way we work is over the course of the year, we send out monthly newsletters to keep everybody on track. They're called On Track newsletters. We do a town hall like this appropriate to every month, wherever we are in the process. So we don't talk big picture every time. It's like, okay, this month, let's do this. And a lot of times it's just talking people off ledges. So everyone kind of understands that it is kind of like it is a marathon, not a sprint. Then once we start to get into the spring, we start doing college list primers where we kind of help families like look for colleges and understand what's there. We kind of, we'll go through the blue list. We kind of will drop the links in there. We'll kind of give them some homework to do. We'll come back to them. Then we'll start to build their timelines with them. And then over the summer, we do workshops, which a lot of families use because it saves a lot of money. Do a Common App workshop for the price of one package hour. Do a UC workshop for the price of one package hour. Do a personal statement workshop. And those are the three most popular: Common App, UC App, and personal statement. And then once you get all that stuff in order, the rest of the summer is building up the essays, the supplements, and getting yourself going. And we also tell people everything doesn't have to be early. We really want students to do things at the right pace for them. The reason why we had so many students be able to submit early actions this summer was because, yesterday was because so many of them had all their ducks in a row, midsummer, and then they kind of were working on essays. They're still writing essays. They'll still be writing them till, Christmas, but, they get ahead of the curve. But then they just submitted the ones they needed to. And then also, building a college list, and this is the very last thing, is also about the financial side of things. Like, where can we afford? Should I make a traditional list where I have, reach, high target, low target, safe schools where it's just like that? Should I make a mushroom list where it's all reach schools at the top and one or two safe schools? Don't do that. Or should I make a pear-shaped list, which is probably going to get a lot of merit scholarship offers? Because, for example, if I go to this, list here, pop up, we can usually, like, if we have a floor, like this is my ceiling, this is just a hypothetical student, this is my floor, somewhere in the middle, if these things are kind of, if they're dropped down, like in kind of like, a way where it's all pretty proportioned, usually around the middle, we call the equator. And if this is a proportional list, below the equator, a lot of those schools will start throwing money at you guys, merit aid. So whatever the GPA is will dictate the floor and the ceiling. And then everything after that will come. Of course, you can sometimes pull some scholarships from up here above your equator, but usually, obviously, the schools that you just get in by the skin of your teeth aren't going to throw a lot of money at you. Some of them do. Some of them just because it's major oriented. And those are all very specific questions: major, student, track record, all that other stuff. So I'm closing down. Let me see. It says, do you recommend students apply for early action, or do you feel students aren't ready to apply for early action would benefit from some of their applications? Yeah, it depends on the students. Like, basically the question is, should you apply early action? One of the things that we do is, if we have a student who's got their list in time, we say, let's click, on that spreadsheet, let's open up all those scholarship ones. And, our team is constantly keeping those things updated. Thanks, Julie. When we do that, we're looking to see if it would be unwise to miss any of those early actions, because some merit scholarship money hinges on you getting in your application on November 1st. And we don't want anyone to miss the opportunity for merit scholarship because they sent in a late application. So you might have 10 schools that you could possibly send early action, but only 3 of them need to be done for the merit aid scholarship. And then you'll prioritize those 3, and then maybe you'll get a couple more on. But to the question that was asked, yeah, sometimes it's about pumping the brakes on some of those early actions and just getting a better application. For students who are going to high caliber schools, we have a lot of kids applying to Stanford, etc. Those applications are usually more arduous. They take more energy. So those schools, the Reddit, college confidential wisdom is like, get it in fast. But we see that doesn't work. Those applications usually need a little bit more combing. We've had more students getting into Stanford and the Ivies in regular decision than early action. because Stanford has 8 essays and they can't be rushed. They all have to be their best because it's Stanford, they all got to be as high as they possibly can. So I guess there's not one size fits all answer to early action or not. It's like we would encourage everyone to hopefully be in the position where they could apply early action if they wanted to. But we also don't want to rush people and give people nervous breakdowns. That's not what this is about. Like the last thing we want to do is have students feeling stressed out by this process. Our job, a lot of our job, if you had a roundtable of all the Blue Train people here, our main priority is to try to make this process not feel stressful, to put things in an order that are streamlined, to create a workflow that is efficient, to create a progression that is kind of enjoyable and almost like fulfilling. I know like that sounds crazy, but at the end, when you see your student submits their last application at the end of the road, a lot of times they're like, I feel good. I feel good about that. I feel good that I did it. I feel good that I put everything I could out there. And then when they start get their acceptances, they feel even better. As long as you have some balance and there's some perspective and the whole family's in this together. And one of the things is that we're not a in-group, out-group with parents. We don't want parents there for the essay writing because that's annoying. But we do want parents, if the parents want to sit in with, the college list build, sometimes we say, if you're going to do 2 sessions, maybe let the student have the first one alone just so they can think, have like some thoughts. But then of course we want the parents involved. We want to like show them what's exciting about these schools. We want them to feel excited about the process as well. And then they can ask questions. And a lot of times they bring up things that the student doesn't bring up themselves. So at the end of the day, this process should be what we call a triangle. If you work with us, obviously we recommend, I say this like not even to be like, businessy, but go do meet and greets with other companies, see how they do things, see who your best fit is. With us, we try to create a triangle. A triangle with us is, the Blue Train, the parents, and the kid. And we try to keep that kind of rotating and revolving communication wise, so that everybody is, everyone is kind of moving and communicating. Okay. Yeah. So if you signed up for our main thing is we don't really start the honest truth. We don't really start with your class really actively hand-holding you guys until December, which is a month from now, because everything up until now is really just test score related and maybe some on tracks if a family wants to do on tracks. But moving forward now, that's why we do this open house. The class of 2024, now once the light is off the class of 2023, then we put it on you guys. And if you ever have questions, you just reach out to the office. They will, send an email and be like, hi, I'm confused. Someone will call you and they will unconfuse you. And then they will kind of, walk you through on-track sessions, which are just like one-on-ones. You got it. On-track sessions, which are just one-on-one guidance, are probably the best way for families. We're actually we're moving to a token system in January, where instead of doing things by hours, they're going to be by tokens, and we're going to convert everybody over to tokens. And the people who signed up in advance will probably get a benefit of extra tokens. But those token one of the options is going to be to have something be Blue Train led, where we're going to be, if you want, have somebody basically guide you through the whole process. Some families don't want that and they just want to do it on their own. So we're going to give you, thanks, Holly, that option. But yeah, so if you haven't done a meet and greet and you want to do it, call the office. If you want to practice test and you just want to see if you want to test, you can do that. If you already signed up with us and you want to kind of set up an on track, just reach out to the office. But any final questions before I let you guys go and I start cooking carnitas? Anybody? Any final questions? All right. Well, guys, listen. So as it goes, I just want you to know, take a breath. It's going to be a good full year. Okay. So just kind of like understand that you and your children are all in this together. If you're with us, we're all in it together with you. We're all in the same boat. And if you have any problems or questions, don't hesitate to reach out. But otherwise, nice seeing all your faces, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye, guys.